everyone to this special webinar. We're talking about podcast guesting for tech savvy entrepreneurs, those with a very technical knowledge. How do you translate that into a compelling podcast appearance where people hear you speak about something technical and have that emotional connection and that pull to want to work with you? Because we all know that, hopefully we all know facts tell, right? We teach people, but then the stories are what sell people. And so today is all about teaching you how to turn that technical expertise, teach it, communicate it through stories, so you have people want to work with you and invest in your program. So I'm going to introduce myself, and then Thurman is also going to introduce himself. So I am Jessica Rhodes. I am the founder and co-owner of Interview Connections. We are the first ever podcast booking agency. We've been booking entrepreneurs as guests on podcasts for 11 years. When I started the company in 2013, there was nobody booking podcast interviews. I started out as a virtual assistant. My dad was actually my first client. He's a business coach and had a newsletter marketing company for a long time. And so I started booking him as a guest on podcasts. Launched interviewconnections.com because there was more and more interest of other people wanting help getting booked and booking guests on their podcasts. And so I have scaled the company, scaled it to 6 figures, started hiring in-house local employees, brought on a business partner, Margie Feldhune, who is our co-owner and CEO. She is out on maternity leave now with a new baby. And we have 12 full-time local team members. We've booked over 30,000 podcast interviews. We work with, how one of our team members said it, both right and left brain entrepreneurs. We work with kind of the tech savvy, like very numbers driven technical entrepreneurs. And then we also have clients who are, coaches and healers. So we work with clients on all types of industries and businesses. But today is really for the tech savvy entrepreneur to learn how to use podcast guesting to grow their business in 2025. And I'm partnering up with Thurman Trotman. And so Thurman, please introduce yourself. Tell everyone here, who you are and what you do.
I'd be happy to. But first, I just want to say what's up to everybody. I'm very excited to see all of the faces joining, all the names, you know what I'm saying? And even though I'm seeing some cameras off, I still see your name. So that's always exciting to me, you know what I mean? So welcome. Real quick, I'm just gonna say, I'm gonna run through my intro really quick. But when I was younger, first of all, I grew up in the Bronx. When I was younger, I, typical teenager, whatever, in the Bronx, hit 18, I joined the Army. Greatest decision of my life. Then after the Army, I got out and I was in the Guard for 1 year. Then after the Guard, I started supporting the government as a contractor. I moved to Maryland. My mother told me to come to Maryland because it's not as expensive as New York. Understatement. Then a few years ago, 2021, I started to do my thing independently. So I was an employee for that time. Now I'm independent. And this is where we are today, which is me trying to help you independently as a person who helps people use SharePoint. So if you pay for the Microsoft 365 suite, there's a tool inside of that suite called SharePoint. You may or may not know about it, but in some organizations, it's known as a 4-letter word, but I try to change that by helping people out. So my primary goal is helping you do your job better using that tool. But, behind that, there's also some education letting you know that it even exists. So I have to sell that.
Thurman, I would love, sorry to interrupt you, but who here uses Microsoft 365? Like just say me or say 365. Let us know in the chat, do you use Microsoft 365? Because it would be helpful to know who's kind of, who has the potential to learn how to use SharePoint. So let us know in the chat if you have Microsoft 365.
Excellent question.
Awesome. All right, continue. I interrupted you.
Well, no, I was really about to finish up and say that's how I help people. So what I do is, first I have to educate some folks because they don't even know that it exists, and then I help you use it. But I primarily play in that government area, and a lot of those folks already know what SharePoint is. But like I said, a lot of them, it's a 4-letter word in some of those organizations because SharePoint, that's another long story. But that's what I help with. I help with SharePoint.
I love it. And so drop it in the chat now. Tell us, how are you marketing your business right now? Because you were drawn to this webinar, right? Because you saw podcast guesting, you're like, oh, that could be a good way to grow. I like podcasts. Like, how can I get out there on podcasts? But essentially, we're teaching you a really specific marketing strategy, which is podcast guesting. So, how are you currently marketing your business? What are you doing to get out there? I know I've connected with a lot of you on LinkedIn, so maybe you're posting on LinkedIn, but what are the ways that you're growing right now? How are you getting your message out there? Let us know in the chat. Have you been a guest on podcast before? It would be really helpful to know. Just drop it in the chat. How are you currently marketing your business? So, Thurman, let's talk a little bit. Why is podcast guesting a good strategy for the tech savvy entrepreneurs that we have here? Like, what have you experienced doing podcast interviews over the last year? Why is this a strategy that's smart for the tech savvy entrepreneur?
Well, number one, primary, above any and everything, is I get to tell stories. So I know you could tell stories anywhere, but one of my pieces of advice is that one, you have to know how to tell stories, but number two is you got to tell those stories with your chest. And one of the best ways to tell those stories with your chest is on a podcast. You know what I mean? When you go on a podcast, the thing that you want to do is be memorable. You know what I'm saying? And that's just not to the guest. You definitely want to be memorable to the host, but you also want to be memorable to the people that you're talking to, which are the listeners. You got to come in there with something different. And I think that when you are excited about what you do, it's very easy to say things with your chest. But my primary thing is tell stories, which is why I started off with the intro to that I did. I was talking about me growing up in the Bronx and all that other stuff, because I personally remember stories easier than I remember like technical information. So that's my number one thing. And I want to give an example. Jess, can I
Yes,
jump in?
please.
Okay. In the chat, I want to see if anybody remembers, maybe like a month or two ago, the dash cam video. So this thing blew up on TikTok where somebody had their dash cam up, but because they had the dash cam up, they were able to record all of this, right? And like a car came shooting down the highway, stopped in front of this person, and then the scam that they were trying to pull was that hopefully this person can keep driving and run into the back of our car, and in that way we could, hop out and say our neck hurt and all that other stuff, and then like sue them. Did anybody see this video?
I saw it. I know what you're talking about.
Okay, you saw it?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, you know what? It's even better that nobody saw this. So, okay, all right, Doug, you saw it. So, what happened was this person is driving, and then somebody comes shooting down the highway, stops their car right in front of them, and then almost causes this person to crash in front of them. I mean, crash into them. But what they did was they hit the brakes fast enough so that they did not crash into the car in front of them. When these people got out of the car, so since that derailed their plans, the next thing they did was put the car in reverse, slammed on the gas, and then hit the car in back of them. So the original plan didn't work. They switched it up and ran their car into the person, right? So now these people get out of the car and start acting like things hurt. They're like, oh, my neck, my back, you know what I'm saying? But then they look into the car and they see that dash cam is sitting on the dashboard. This person had a dash cam. So then they get back into the car scared because they're like, oh no, this person is recording. This is not going to work. We need to get back into the car. That story right there. If I was selling dash cams, I'm telling that story every time, because that is something that people can relate to. People drive, people, get into accidents. People need to have these dash cams. And if I'm selling dash cams, I'm starting off with a story. So this is why I keep talking about you got to tell stories. You got to tell stories. I'm telling that story, and then I'm going to relate it to them. I'm going to say, because of that accident, because of that accident, they were able to take it to court and, beat it because they had the dash cam on. This gives me a reason to tell you why this is important for you. So it's not like I'm telling the story because I'm trying to make it important for me to sell these dash cams. I'm making it important for you because if somebody tries to pull this on you, or even a regular accident, you need that dash cam up recording the information. So I'm gonna make it valuable to you. And then, hey, it just so happens that I can provide this dash cam to you. And lo and behold, read a story. Dash cam sales shot through the roof after this happened. So this is what I'm talking about. If you try to go somewhere and say, hey, my dash cam, it has, I don't know, FPS, this many frames per second, and it can see this range, and here's the price difference between my camera and that camera. look, those things are important, but that's not how you want to talk to people. You want to tell them about how it relates to them. So I'm starting off with that story, and then I'm gonna be like, and I have that camera. You know what I'm saying? That we have it in stock. So if you need that, this, that, and the third, whatever, whatever. It's a great story to tell in person or on social media or anywhere else. But you know, this goes along with the whole telling the story thing. I got more, but Jess, let me stop there.
Yeah. Yeah, stories are really important. And I like that Thurman and I are kind of coming together on this because Thurman's the tech savvy entrepreneur and I am not that tech savvy. Like I'm a storyteller, I'm a speaker on podcasts, I do sales, I do marketing, but the technical stuff is kind of foreign to me. As a tech savvy entrepreneur, your ideal clients are likely not tech savvy. Like they're hiring you because they don't know what you know. And just like with the dash cam thing, they don't know what questions to ask. Like, for example, yesterday I was purchasing a gift for my husband. He wanted a chainsaw for Christmas. And so I'm like there and I'm like, I don't even know what questions to ask, like voltage, inch. I'm like, I don't know, you know? So I need someone to explain it to me. When a business leader, like I saw Brewster said, we have a lot of techs joining our user group session, but I need business leaders who hate their current IT. And so business owners who have a tech challenge, they likely, it is such a blind spot for them. They do not understand. They don't know what questions to ask. You need to make yourself visible to them and tell stories in a way that they're like, oh, like you understand what my challenges are. Like we have certain tech challenges at Interview Connections where we're like, I don't even know what questions to ask or who to find because we like, it's not our area of expertise. So as a tech leader, you need to go on podcasts and share stories so that those business leaders who need you can make a connection. And they're like, okay, you're the person I trust to help me through this. So stories are what make your company and your IT offerings, your tech offerings relatable. And it makes it so the business leaders who you want to be working with you, it makes it so they can connect with you and trust you to work with you.
Absolutely. Most definitely. Yeah. And Scott, how you doing? Scott Brewster over there, you know what I mean? Yeah, to your point, so I've experienced that on LinkedIn myself. Because obviously I come out and I talk about SharePoint. I talk about SharePoint. So I do a lot of marketing on LinkedIn. Because I talk about SharePoint so much, it attracted a lot of other people in the tech industry, which is great. I love these folks. You know what I mean? Like those are my folks. But I had to update the way that I was talking about certain things because I, like you, I need to talk to the decision makers. I don't need to talk to the tech folks. They already know what I know. Matter of fact, they know more than I know when it comes to this tech. I need to talk to the decision makers so that they can I need to talk to the decision makers so that they can implement people like me to do certain things. And the way that you talk to those people is you have to look, I go through a process. My process is telling stories. But then second to that is telling those stories with my chest because I really truly do believe in what I'm talking about. Then after that, as I'm telling these stories with my chest, I'm making it relevant to them. Like to my point about the dash cam. It's not about me. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot of times that I do demos or intros to people and I forget to talk about myself because I'm not focused on myself. I did a chat locally here a few months ago. I'm all rocking and rolling, knocking it out of the park, and somebody who is on the side was helping me out. He goes, Thurman, introduce yourself. And I was like, oh yeah, let me backtrack real quick, tell y'all a little bit about myself because I'm hyper focused on how the technology can help the person. You know what I mean? So that's another piece that I wanted to add.
Yeah, let us know in the chat, what is your expertise? I'm saying Brewster, but I guess you guys know each other. It's Scott.
That's Scott.
Okay. So Brewster, Scott, okay, is being pretty active. Tell us, like, what is your expertise and who is your target audience? Like, what type of technical expertise do you have? And then what types of clients do you want to be working with and attracting? Stories. No, it's okay. You can stay in the chat here. We appreciate you. So stories are what create the connection. Stories are what bridge the gap from your expertise to your ideal client's problem. People will buy from you and they will invest lots and lots of thousands of dollars with you when they feel and they know that you understand their problem more than they understand it. So podcast appearances, storytelling, conversations where you can break things down and explain it will do that very effectively. And that is why podcast guesting is such an important strategy for tech savvy entrepreneurs, is because it's the perfect platform and avenue to share stories and communicate to your target audience that you understand what their challenge is, you have a solution to it, you can use stories and metaphors and analogies and examples so that they can go, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I get that, I get that, I get that. So these conversations are absolutely perfect.
Okay, so Scott said I do. They have no idea how badly their current networks and PCs are configured. I see terrifying stuff every single day. They don't know to listen. Okay. Now, see, if I'm in that industry where I'm like, talking about fixing your networks, which by the way, I used to do that way back in the day. And I would just say I don't miss it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was cool, but I don't really miss dealing with the networks, you know what I mean? But I would say if the situation is that their networks are configured badly, what we know about a badly configured network is that something can get breached. You know what I mean? And if something gets breached, your data is now exposed and you're putting your data at risk. And the folks who manage this data, you're putting them at risk. This is a problem that has nothing to do with getting into the weeds of technology. I can talk to you and say, you see that breach that happened over there with X, Y, and Z company? I bet you they wasn't even doing this, this, and this. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm talking to you in plain language first before I even start to talk about the technology. Again, with the dash cam video, I bet you I can make frames per second make sense after I tell that story. So if I say when that first person got out of the car, the scam car, you couldn't really see their face. But with a better camera, you immediately see their face because my camera goes X frames per second and it can see it longer. It can see people's faces clearer and longer, something like that. The point is staying away from the technology. Go ahead, Jess. Sorry.
Yeah. So another thing that I want to make sure people understand is that who here is only marketing their business through written content? You're posting on LinkedIn, you're writing articles, you're doing blogs, like email marketing, like everything is written. Like, let me know. And I know we don't have a super chatty group here. Maybe folks are listening in, but if you are only communicating your expertise, okay, great. You are totally missing out on a segment of the population that needs to hear things explained verbally in order to understand them. And let me give you an example. We have business insurance, as all businesses should. We've got professional liability business insurance. And so we were like kind of changing our plan to get some coverages we need. And our insurance broker, who I've worked with over a long time, is like explaining things in email, aspects of insurance. And I'm like, I don't understand. And I'm reading the email and I'm just like, I feel like a kid in class who I don't get it. And I'm like, I don't understand this. Like, we need to have a conversation. We get on a call within 3 minutes. He explains it. And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. He kind of said the same thing that he was saying in email. I needed to hear it. I'm an auditory, like, I need to talk it through. I need to repeat it back to make sure I understand that I'm understanding it correctly. And we were good to go, sign the contract, pay the bill. So there are people who prefer to read. There are people who prefer to listen. There are people who need to see the video and hear you talking and read the transcript. So if you are only doing written content, you are missing out on people that could hear the same thing you're writing, but they're going to get it better if they can hear you speak.
Yeah, totally agree. And not just hearing you speak, but when you're a guest on a podcast, tons of podcasts these days, they do video. So it's not just going to be hearing you speak, they get to see you as well. And that's a part of your marketing. You know what I mean? Like the way you sound, the way you look, whether you like it or not, it's literally that's just the human nature, you know what I'm saying, aspect of it. So, and that's another piece that I think is super, super, super important, because it's not just about telling stories, but it's about being a really good listener. Like, if there's anything that I feel is a natural talent of mine that comes easy to me, that I would tell people to go work that muscle, is being a good listener. Like, you have to listen to people and wait for those things that sound like pain points or sounds like things that make them human, and then talk to them about those things. So if you're selling technology and you hear someone, like if you're in Scott's situation and you hear someone say something about, like a breach. I don't want that breach to happen to us. That's a real thing that they're talking about. You know what I mean? You can't stay in your technical zone and then not latch on to the human aspect of, I kind of fear this. This is a little scary to me because my business means a lot to me. The data that we manage in our business means a lot. I don't want to, have that exposed. That's something that you have to be mindful of, you know what I'm saying, when you're talking to a potential client. You got to be extremely good at listening. And I really mean that. I'm not even like saying it louder because it's like some tactic. I mean, like dead serious.
Yeah.
But yeah,
So
I got more on that.
yeah, so I want to go through kind of, Thurman as a case study so you guys can see like what it actually looks like to grow through podcast guesting now that we've kind of talked about like the why and the value of it and the importance of it. So Thurman and I met because I was a guest on a podcast that he listens to, The Mindset Answer Man with Cliff Ravenscraft. Cliff and I have known each other for a decade. He brought me on his podcast, interviewed me all about what we're talking about here, podcast guesting. And so Thurman, now I'm going to shift to your POV.
Mm-hmm.
You heard that interview, and then what?
I got excited because I was like, wait a minute, there's people who, well, not wait a minute, there's people who do this because I heard about this before, but it was like out of my mind. I wasn't even like paying attention anymore. You re-sparked something which was like, oh, that's a good idea. You know what I mean? To be able to go from podcasts or to go on podcasts and talk about a certain thing. So I reached out and I'm an energy guy, you know what I mean? So we matched energy and I was like, okay, this is what's up. And I want to be down. So that all came because of you being able to speak to even those many people. I felt like I was listening to you were speaking to me. And so then I had to reach out, we had some chats and then the rest is history. So it works.
Yeah. And because Thurman heard me on a podcast with a host that he knows and that he trusts, he chose to engage Interview Connections versus if he's like looking for a podcast booking agency, right? If your clients are out there searching for the service that you provide and they just go to Google and they're like, none of the business owner that's actually being interviewed and speaking is the one that's going to attract more leads because they're making it easy for the leads to actually engage in their content and get to know them. A lot of buyers now will binge through content and engage in your free content before they ever book a call and opt in. So if you don't have any free content, podcast appearances, videos for people to consume before the sales process, you're going to lose out on a lot of buyers now because people just don't trust as much nowadays. There's so many online businesses and online service providers. So Thurman started working with us earlier this year. And so what are the types of podcasts that you're being interviewed on? Like kind of walk us through, like, what are you being interviewed about? What's your goal? Like I know you have a few different service offerings. Just kind of give everyone the case study of how you're growing your tech business through podcast guesting.
So it's again, I have to talk to business owners and I have to talk to people in a certain space, you know what I mean? Like the GovCon space. But talking to a business owner gets me again to the decision maker. So to your point about I already trusted Cliff as the host. I like to make this comparison because I really do believe this is how it works. So for music, right? I have to assume everybody here listens to music. And you might have a favorite artist or multiple artists, right? If your favorite artist does a feature with an artist that you've never heard of before, but that song turns out to be really good, that new artist that they featured with is now on your radar. And the only way that they got on your radar is because the artist that you trust and you love had them as a feature. So now think about all the artists that you know about simply because somebody you already listened to had them feature on a song with them or multiple songs. So now you have your original artist that you like, and now you have this new artist who that's always exciting. You get to find out about a new artist and go listen to their music and see what they're about and see if they're a good fit for you. And now they're in your playlist. This is how it works on podcast guesting. If I go on someone's show, they have an audience, big or small or medium. They have an audience. That audience listens to them regularly. They trust them. So if you're gonna be on that platform, it's like you're being a feature. on a song. So I get on that platform. Now listen, when that artist gets on there, it's on that artist to be good. Like if you're not a good artist, but this person thought it was just like a good business move to have you on there, hey, it might work out for them. You know what I mean? But in order to get that long-term support from new fans, you got to be good. So get on the show and then provide value. And like I said, tell the story, tell it with your chest, make it about them. That whole rigmarole. Did I get on shows and I do that? I'm not saying these things in theory. I'm saying like I literally do these things. And then here comes people reaching out. Hey, I heard you on so-and-so's podcast. At that point, it's on me. Like now they have to go through my catalog, listen to my music, and see if they like it. And these days, since we stream everything, do I earn a spot on your playlist? Okay, cool. Now I'm on your playlist. Do I earn a chance for you to buy a ticket and come to one of my shows? This is the way my brain works. You know what I mean? And so I'm thinking that way when I get on these shows. And I need the host to have everything set up for me. You know what I'm saying? And then I come in and I perform. It's great. It's
Yes.
great. It's great for me. You know what I'm saying? It's great for me because I again, that's how my brain works and it just makes sense. And so yeah, I'm loving it. I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, and you have your own podcast. You're always putting up videos on social media.
I do.
So I love this analogy of the music collaboration because, yeah, you go and collaborate with a host and do a great interview, invite people to come connect with you, opt in for your freebie, go to connect with you on LinkedIn. And I love that you said it's up to you to then keep them there, because if you go get interviewed on a bunch of podcasts and invite people back to your LinkedIn, you're not posting anything, you don't have anything on your website. It's like you're inviting them to a party, but nobody's there and there's no drinks and there's no food. And they're like, I'm going to leave now. So,
Right.
but when they go to your LinkedIn, like they're short form videos, they can go listen to your podcast. There's other interviews you've done on other podcasts that probably share your expertise from a different point of view and a different angle. And so being a guest on podcasts is all about bringing people back. Like I'm speaking to the audience here. You're posting on LinkedIn, you have content, like you've got your YouTube, whatever you're doing. Going on podcasts is like just going out and bringing people into the party. It's like, hey, no, I've got something great over here. It's just bringing people in, bringing people in, bringing people in. I love this. Scott said I did get a $5,000 a month client because of this group. See, the thing is, when you have a high ticket offering, when you go get on podcasts, it doesn't take a high volume of people to make it a really good use of your time. Thurman, talk about what are you being interviewed about? We know you're a SharePoint expert, and you also talk about like intranet for business owners. Like, who is your ideal client? And then what are you being interviewed about on these podcasts to have your ideal clients want to reach out to you?
Right. So that's an excellent question. I do want to talk about that. So at first it would be like, yo, SharePoint is great. You know what I mean? Here are the various reasons you should use it. Here's different ways. But I've refined it to where I have found my best clients. My best clients are, we need to get you set up with an intranet first. That's the base, which is basically a website, but it's internal for your business. Let me do that first because one, that allows me to deliver value pretty quickly. And then two, it's a substantial amount of money. It's not through the roof, but it's nothing to sneeze at, but it's good enough money for them to turn it over and also for me to have a conversation with them or have them get to know me on the show. So my thing is, you need to have a one-stop shop first. So here's the language that I use. The language is intranet. That's the technical term for what I want you to know about. But I'm not using that heavily. I'm going to use that so that people know what it is. But my words are one-stop shop. I'm asking you, does your business, does everybody in your business, you and everybody else in your business, have the ability to go to one location to find any and everything that you need inside of the business? Do they have that? That makes way more sense than, hey, do you have an intranet? Because technology is yeah. Technology is duplicated in so many different ways across multiple platforms. You know what I mean? So you just have to talk about things that, yes, make yours unique, but more so what makes it valuable to that person. So if that business feels like I'm sending emails to send people to this thing, or when we get a new person, I got to send them like a Word document with a long list of things that they, are going to need. So then when they need to go back to that, they got to go search through their email. Or me, myself, well, I'm maybe the co-owner, I'm a manager in the business. I'm trying to find things and I got to go through my own inbox. So I got to look through various places to find a thing. I'm talking to you and saying you need one location. And how do we use the internet now? We go to websites. You can create a website for your business internally. That is your very first step. Because then after that, all of the million things that SharePoint can do, I can say, since you have your one location, we're going to build this thing in the background and then we add it to the one location. This is the new, here's an example. Like, let's say you don't have a ticketing system for IT. You don't have an IT ticketing system. There's people who come to me and say, yeah, the IT ticketing system is important. But I'm like, I get it. And sometimes I'll do that. But if I could tell you more so your intranet is important so that you could train everybody in the company to come to that one place, when we build that ticketing system, that's the new thing that we publicize on the intranet. So let's go intranet first, the one-stop shop, and then build these other things out of automation, and it includes documents and all that other stuff. The point is talking to them like a regular person. And that's what I do on these shows. I sell intranets. Even though I sell a billion other things, it's really about the internet.
Yeah. So when Thurman goes on a podcast for business leaders, for organizations that need what he has, he is able to explain it and break it down. And what is an internet and why is it important and what problems would it solve in a way that by the end of the episode, they're like, oh, I get it. If I am scrolling on LinkedIn and I see a post about intranet, you better believe I'm scrolling right by it because that sounds super boring and I don't care about intranets. But if I am listening to a podcast and I hear Thurman talking about, whatever he's talking about is energy, I'm like, oh, this guy's fun. Oh, cool. Now I get it.
Yeah. I think that's super important. Like I said, you got to bring that, your natural energy. You don't have to be like, wacky and over the top, because I'm definitely not doing that. Like what you see here is literally me. But just real quick, I wanted to answer this from Lisa. So Lisa says, does Thurman use AI to help find topics? Excellent question, because I forgot I was going to mention this. So even if you are struggling with what I'm saying right now about telling stories, which to me is the very first step, you can go to AI for that. So at least ChatGPT anyway. So if you have a ChatGPT account and you say, listen, I sell this for my business. I'm about to go on a podcast. I'm going to be a guest. Can you give me some stories that I might be able to tell around this? And then they'll give you some suggestions. And you look through them and say, all right, well, is there anything current in the news that maybe I can relate this to? Okay, yeah, here's some situations. Just go back and forth with it. Talk to it. You know what I'm saying? And then latch onto that and bring that to your episode. You know what I'm saying? And say, yo, you heard, Target just had a breach. You know what I mean? And apparently people's information is exposed. But the companies I deal with, I've dealt with hundreds of companies to date, and none of them have had a breach because I locked down the network and this, that, and the third, whatever. So you got to tell those stories. But yes, Lisa, absolutely.
Yeah.
I use AI.
Yeah, AI is super, super helpful. I mean, I just started using ChatGPT like 3 months ago. Thank you, Douglas from Team Connections for telling me to use it. But that's also something as a podcast booking agency, we help you with as well. If you were to work with Interview Connections, and we leverage AI too. Like the booking team is in there too, because the booking team, again, if you work with Interview Connections to get the podcast appearances booked, is we know kind of what podcast hosts are responsive to. Like sometimes a client will submit a topic and we're like, I don't think that's going to hit the mark. Like a host might just be like, that's not interesting. So using AI, but also working with an expert who can like make sure your messaging is going to resonate with your target market and the podcast hosts that would want to have you on their show.
Yeah, definitely. Jess, I want to jump back in real quick with
Go for it.
Okay, so I want to stay on this music analogy because again, this is how my brain works. If you're good at a thing, this is what you do. So you might be thinking, okay, yeah, I could tell some stories. That's cool. And maybe you'll say, I'm going to go try this out. What comes along with being an artist is all these other things besides being an artist. So if you want to, make a new song, you may have a whole process that you do. I go in the studio, I lock in for like 2 or 3 hours. I call up people, I invite people to the studio session. I need to order some food. I need to take a break and come back because my mind is like I do a whole thing. This is just to make a song, or maybe I'm making a whole entire album. That's what I'm good at. That's what I want to do. I might have an agent now who's like, yo, listen, you do your thing. I'm going to go out there and find people who I know love your music and who I know mess with these artists. So I'm going to see if we could get you a feature on these artists. You know what I'm saying? I know who's up and coming. I know who is maybe a little bit out of reach, but still I'm going to try to get with them. I know who's from your region. I know all of these things. Could I do it on my own? Realistically, yeah, but effectively, no. You know what I mean? Because I'm focusing on being an artist. That's my thing. That's what I want to do. So if I now have this agent who I work with, and this agent is going and do those things for me, again, this is how my brain works. I am trying to outsource things that I don't want to do. You know what I'm saying? So I want to show up on these podcasts and tell people the good word about SharePoint. That's what I want to do. I don't want to have to spend a bunch of time trying to book these shows. So again, if you think about an artist, which I would also say you should consider yourself an artist. You get creative and you do certain things that, people will pay for and they need. So don't separate yourself from being an artist. And then, find somebody who could do these other things for you. I just want to throw that out there, Jess.
Yeah, Thurman, I feel called to show your one sheet. Can we show everyone your one sheet?
Let's do it.
Okay. So part of podcast guesting is having a one sheet. A one pager is really the tool that gets you noticed by podcast hosts. It's kind of your it's your hub of you as an expert, you as an authority in your niche. And this is something that we make for our clients at Interview Connections in the onboarding process. We put together this one sheet. So I'm going to share my screen to show you guys Thurman's one sheet. So first of all, we make a media kit for you. So that way, when you're booked on a podcast, you can go ahead and see, that the host has everything that they need. So this is Thurman's one sheet. It's got links to website, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. So that way it's easy for hosts to just go and find him. It has his bio. This is typically like what the host is going to read when they're introducing Thurman to the podcast. Sometimes they'll pre-record it like at another time. A lot of times the hosts for me, they're like, oh yeah, I'll read your bio separately and introduce you to the show at outside of this actual recording. And then we've got the topics. Thurman, what do you want to you don't have to like read all the topics here word for word, but just kind of walk us through the strategy of these topics, which ones the podcast hosts ask you most often, how you came up with these topics.
Well, because of my expertise, you know what I mean? And talking to people over all of the years. And I'll tell you, one of the ones that they latch on to the most is me saying that SharePoint is better than Excel, AKA spreadsheets. People have this, this relationship with spreadsheets that, some people are in love with their spreadsheets. Some people have a love-hate relationship with their spreadsheets because they're like, this is working, but I feel like there's a better way, you know what I mean, type thing. I wedge myself in between that relationship and start to cause some problems. So I know that people, they love their spreadsheets, but I'm like, listen, you can do that with spreadsheets. That's cool. But let me show you a better way. And this better way doesn't mean you have to get rid of your spreadsheets. You know what I mean? You don't have to do that. You know what I mean? We just want to, I use this term. I'm always like, yo, do you want to eat cereal with a fork? You wouldn't eat cereal with a fork. Can you? Yes. But there's going to be a lot of milk drippage. You know what I'm saying? That's going to be happening. So you need a spoon, which is a better tool for doing these things, right? So you're using a fork to eat cereal. I just walk in there and say, hey, did you know that there's a spoon and a spoon works way better to do these things? That's one of my quips. So they latch on to that, right? Then there's this whole winning money. People perk up when you talk about money. You know what I mean? Then there's my fault. And then the documents. So documents are big too because I'm not a heavy document user. This is not Scott. I'm not a heavy document user. But I know all of the organizations I've worked with over the years, tons and tons and tons of files, lots of documents. So even though documents are not a big deal to me, I know it's a big deal to these organizations. So that's something that we got to talk about. I have to tell you a better way to manage your documents inside of a tool that you're already paying for. That's one thing that I also get asked about a lot, but I got to update my sheet because it's one of the most air catching things is that you are already paying for it. I'm not introducing some new tool outside of your environment. If you pay for the Microsoft 365 suite, this thing is already available to you. And the extra oomph that I have is that it's a Microsoft tool. It's not a brand new tool. Everybody knows Microsoft, but they don't know SharePoint. So that's an easier thing for me to talk about. And then once you get ready to do a podcast, if you do you hang out in the green room, talk to them ahead of time, you can shape this. You know what I'm saying? This is they might say, not might say, they will say, because this has happened to me. Well, hey, does SharePoint do this? Does SharePoint do that? Can we talk about that? And just roll with it. You know what I'm saying? If you're if you have the expertise in your domain, that should be fairly easy for you to do.
Yeah. And the strategy that I want to hone in on to make sure folks picked up on it here. So this is definitely a note to write down. The topics here are very intentional. That they're very strategic. It's not just like, oh, here's some stuff I could teach about my expertise and like hopefully people connect with it. Thurman really thinks through what are the objections that an ideal client would have in the sales process. When you are educating people on said objections in a podcast before they even get to a sales call, you will close more sales. I had a consultation call with a client who I talk a lot about audience size. I'll stop sharing my screen for a moment. So I talk a lot about podcast audience sizes because for us, if somebody comes to a consultation call with me or Douglas and they're like, I only want to be on shows with 10,000 listeners or more, we're going to have a very hard time closing that client because number one, the audience size is in public, so there's no way to know how big the audience is. And number two, the vast majority of shows do not have 10,000 more listeners. So it just eliminates so many possibilities and we wouldn't be able to meet that. And so I talk a lot about that in podcast appearances to educate people that podcast downloads aren't public. Even a top 5% show has like 500 listeners, 1,000 listeners. It's a great podcast, but these are small audiences. That's why they're valuable. And so this client heard a podcast interview because I sent it to her before the sales call. I said, hey, listen to this interview before we meet. I sent her the one with Cliff, the one that Thurman heard. And she comes to the call and she goes, I had written down to ask you about audience size, but I heard you talk about it and I saw her scratch that question off of her list. So know what the objections and the obstacles that you get in your sales process and weave them into your podcast interview topics. Send interviews with you as a guest to your leads before the consultation call, ask them to listen, and they will come to the call warmed up and much closer to being ready to buy than had they come to that call cold.
Yeah, that happened to me on my own podcast. So look, I happen to think I'm a pretty good podcast host. I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? Eventually I'm gonna get out there. But I think I do a good job of talking about this boring technology and making it interesting to people who are listening. I remember when I first started promoting my show, I would say, I am talking about something boring, but trust me, we'll get through that. Don't worry about that, because one of the announcements I make on my show is I'm not here to talk about tech. I'm talking about strategy, setting them up right from the beginning to let them know I'm not going to bog you down with a bunch of technology. I need to tell you why you need to use this. On multiple occasions, I've had calls with people. A matter of fact, someone in a totally other country, I didn't even check my stats to see I was being listened to from another country, here's my show and goes and books a call with me, pays to book a call with me before I didn't even know this happened. I got the email notification and then I'm like, hey, see you booked a call. What do you need? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's talk about it. And then we set up a call, multiple calls. I did some work for them. It was a whole thing. Like, I've made substantial money out of this. And this is because I was able to use my voice. But in this case, I'm talking about my show. My show. But it's still the same when you go on other shows and do the same thing. This person, this is very awkward for me because I'll just tell you what she said. But she was like, oh my God, in an accent. She's like, oh my God, you're like a celebrity. I listen to all your episodes. I'm like, I always downplay that stuff because I don't consider myself that to be any of that. I just think I know a good amount about SharePoint to help people out. I've been doing it for a billion years. I know what I'm talking about. But that's the impression that she entered that call with, which is the same thing that I did with Jess. I entered that call with Jess like she pretty much has to, like, tell me to get out of this get out of this call in order for me not to follow through. So the same thing with me. It's just like the setup was already there. If people hear you on a podcast and you spew that expertise, you have a good time with the host, you relax and enjoy yourself, they're going to reach out to you and you have the upper hand. They're ready to be like, all right, I wish I had that meme where you just like the dude is throwing his money at the camera, like, yo, just take all my money. Because you
Yes.
set it up ahead of time to show your personality and show your expertise.
It really is. It really does create the celebrity factor. When people listen to you a lot on podcasts and they see the videos that you're doing, because the other tip that we have is repurposing your podcast interviews. So I kind of mentioned it there with sending it to your leads before the consultation call. But when you take these podcast appearances, like the video version of the interview, and you use something like Opus Clip, which is an AI tool that both Thurman and I, love to use, it'll clip your podcast interview into like 30 clips, like 30 little 1-minute clips that then you could put on LinkedIn. So now your LinkedIn followers are not only seeing your little written posts that they're probably scrolling by, but they're also watching your videos and they're hearing you speak. And suddenly you're coming across as an authority, as a thought leader, and you're engaging more of your audience who didn't want to read the posts or who weren't reading the posts. Okay. So yes, excellent. I thought about investing in that. Opus Clip. Yes, it's a great tool, very inexpensive. Opus Clip is what I like to use for repurposing my podcast appearances. And then using these interviews to engage your existing audience, because anyone who's been online for more than a day and has been in business for a minute, we all have prospective clients already in our audience. I just received an email this morning from somebody I had a consult call with in 2023, like a year and a half ago. And she's like, hey, my book is out. I'm ready to reconnect. I had her in my ghosted stage of my pipeline. Like she had ghosted. I had not heard from her. And she's like, hey, I'm ready. So there are people already on your email list, already following you on LinkedIn, who they're a future client of yours. But if you're not getting on podcasts and sharing those interviews and sharing those videos, they're not going to reconnect and engage with you.
Yeah, and Lisa, I think you could start with Opus for free. I believe I used it for free for a little bit, then I eventually paid for it. So
yep, they definitely have a free trial at the very least. Depends how much content you're repurposing, but yeah,
right,
it's great. Any questions? I would love to just see if anyone has questions about podcast guesting for tech savvy businesses, how this could work for you. I guess we kind of talked about it a little bit, but a big question a lot of people often have is like, what are the right types of shows? And so it's really important to know who your ideal clients are. We talked about in the beginning, like I think it was Scott who was saying, a lot of like tech people are connected. Like you might have a lot of people in your industry who are connected with you, but they're not the actual clients. Like they wouldn't be the one hiring you. So you want to get on podcasts with your target audience. So Thurman, do you want to talk a little bit more about the types of podcasts and like the types of podcasts that you're guesting on?
Yeah, I do, but I also want to put a little twist on this, right?
Oh.
So one of my favorite things about Interview Connections that I always say is that there's people in here, right? So I forgot what this person I'm connected with on LinkedIn, she said it one time. She said that she's I keep forgetting the term. I always have to go back to the DM when I asked her. She's one of those people who she has to speak it in a conversation with somebody to I think
talk
grasp
to think?
It. What is it?
I say talk to think. I talk to think.
It is that. It's that, but there's like a term apparently for it.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Which I didn't know, but I'm that person. So you just saw my one sheet. If I would have entered Interview Connections and was told, hey, do your one sheet, I would probably not do it. And if I did do it, I wouldn't do it to the quality that it was done. And I was just talking about AI a second ago. Could I AI my way back and forth with, AI to possibly do something like a one sheet? I could probably do that too, but not again. What's inside of Interview Connections are expertise, humans who I could speak to. So I said that there's certain types of shows I was going on for a few months. There was a certain type of show. Then I was like, man, I'm refining my offer. I'm thinking about things differently. Uh, I want to update it. So inside of the program, I was able to back and forth with somebody and then get on a few calls with someone, a whole person, to get my new sheet refined. So not out yet, dropping soon, but that is one of my favorite things because again, I have to talk. You know what I'm saying? There's times that I could sit, even though the type of work that I do where I sit and stare at a computer and do a lot of typing to get something done, my brain races while I'm doing it and I'm thinking, but it's not until I'm connecting with people and speaking out loud that that new ideas start flying through my head and I'm like, oh man, like just now when we was talking, I didn't write it down, but I said there's a new bullet that I wanted to add to my thing because it just that idea came to me. So the type of shows that I now will be going on is going to be a little bit more refined because I've refined my audience, but I was able to do it through a person and get my one sheet updated. I love that. You know what I'm saying? Like especially with AI coming up here, on our heels, I'm starting a
Mhm.
program next year. And one of the ways that I'm telling people about it is like, look, AI is prolific. You know what I'm saying? It's out there. But I like human connection. Even though AI is like, powerful, I like human connection. So if I could build my own little community where people are in there finding value, high value, because I get to really focus on them like that, then I can't wait. You know what I'm saying? So same thing here. I love interacting with people and you know, that's the type of shows that I'm going on are now being refined because I was able to refine my audience or
Yeah,
my
it's
my
a
my main
strategy.
audience. Yes, it's a
It's a
strategy.
long-term strategy, understanding your market, having that one sheet, being really intentional and strategic about what you're being interviewed about, getting on shows with your target audience listening, and really refining all the different ways that you can leverage podcast interviews. We could definitely talk about this for a long time. We're coming up at the top of the hour, and some folks are starting to hop off for their next call. So I want to just leave y'all with an invitation to connect with myself, with Thurman. On my side of things, interviewconnections.com. If you want to be on podcasts, you see a real possibility for how this can grow your business, we can help you. We can get you booked. I saw a question about what is your pricing model. Book a call with us. The link is right there in the chat here on Zoom. If you're watching the replay, we'll put the link right below the video. Book a call. Douglas or I will get you the pricing information depending on when people listen to this. I want to make sure you have updated information. We offer a program, you get guaranteed bookings, everything that Thermo was talking about, like one sheet support, coaching on the strategy, all that's included. So book a call to learn more. We've got a holiday sale going. So if you sign up by the end of the year, there will be a discount and some bonus gifts. So book a call. And then Thurman, tell everyone how they can connect with you.
Yeah, on LinkedIn. If you are a business owner and you are struggling with what I was talking about, having things all over the place, you can't get to everything in one location. Um, book a call with me and let's see if we can get you taken care of. Extra if you're already in the paying for the Microsoft 365 suite. I will say real quick, last week I just completed somebody's intranet, and yes, it comes along with money, but one of my favorite things is watching their faces light up as I do a demo showing them their new site. And I get high off of that, you know what I'm saying? So I just did that and they're reviewing it, coming back with some updates and another satisfied customer. And then on top of that, long term, just like podcast guessing, SharePoint is a long term thing. We just start with the intranet to get you taken care of, and then we have the runway of getting you updated. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn. Let's book a call if you're interested.
I love that. I love that. And Thurman, as a client of ours, knows that we use Google Sheets and all that. And he reached out to our team and was like, "You guys, like, I think you can improve." I mean, I think our systems are great, but obviously Thurman, as an expert in everything, like saw it, and so he met with our team and overhauls like that. I'm sure from your perspective, you're like, this wouldn't be hard, but for us, it's like mental bandwidth wise, it wasn't a
I
right
know
now
that.
thing. But the team, it is on their list. Like I know it's on their list of things they're going to push for, initiatives they're going to push for in 2025. So that's the thing, you have to educate your market, and everyone has a different sales cycle with their clients. There's going to be prospective clients like me for Thurman that aren't going to buy today, but it's like the continuous education process is like a future thing. And then there's going to be people who were looking for your solution. Then they heard you on a podcast and it's like the stars aligned and they're in. But the more you stay visible, the more you educate. Listen, when you're in a tech business, you're doing something technical, maybe you're, in marketing, you're doing advertising for people. You got to educate your clients. They are not experts like you are. You have to break it down and continuously educate them, stay visible, and that's what's going to move people across the finish line. So go connect with Thurman on LinkedIn. Again, we're going to put the links below the video. Thank you all for hanging out with us this Thursday afternoon.
Jess, I can't hear you. Is that me? Yeah, I can't hear you. Oh no.
Okay. I turned
There you
off.
go. You're back. You're back.
Something happened with my microphone, so I just changed over. I took maybe my little microphone died.
Gotcha. Okay.
We're at the end of the show anyway, so go connect with Thurman, book a call with Interview Connections, and have a happy holiday. Thanks, everyone.
See y'all. Thanks.